Hey everybody, welcome to Live App Review episode 26, I think. We'll be doing a walkthrough of my API helper, which is a Cloudflare worker written in just front-end JavaScript. So it's the same JavaScript that you could put into your apps. And then episode 27, which we're also recording today, will be Vadim, who's also on the call with us, talking about his API server, which is like a easily deployable kind of backend service where you can talk to Near. You can talk to Near just via a REST API. So you'll see some kind of similarities between these two videos, and we just hope that it's helpful for you while you're building your apps and deciding like which tools you need to support your app development. You guys want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dorian.
Hey.
Hey. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I'm looking at, it's not our traditional apps repo, like Near, usually we're like in Near-apps, but it's actually the Near organization, just because I felt like this was a tool that was a little bit more general, that maybe someone from Near wants to keep working on or wants to kind of mess around with. So I just wanted to have a little bit more visibility, sort of general visibility. So it's /near/near-api-helper. So there's a little bit of a README. It's still kind of a work in progress. So, you know, there's like no real warranty to this, but there's some example calls and things that you can wrap your head around. You can actually use it right now. An example of it working is in this NFT gallery app. So did you notice the first load took a little bit? Well, the second load will actually be cached on Cloudflare. So if I refresh this now, it's there. So that's because basically, oh, I don't have the network here. But basically, because I should have opened this ahead of time. Basically, the first load is going to Cloudflare, and it's basically asking for all of these NFTs. And then it actually has to do an RPC call with Near, go get the data, bring it back to Cloudflare. So it brings it to a data center on you know, the what's called like the edge, right? So it's a data center. I'm in Vancouver, so it's probably a data center in Vancouver or Seattle. So the request goes out, goes to Cloudflare data center. This little piece of JavaScript says, okay, I need to use the Near API JS to call the Near blockchain, call this smart contract, get these NFTs, bring them into the Cloudflare data center, and then you can decide to do something with them, and then you can cache that response, and then you can give it to the client. Now, the next time the client goes, provided that they're still close to the same data center, they will get the cached response. So you can kind of finely grained control how caching works. So I think I set it to be cached up to 5 minutes. So if I refresh again, it should be like lightning fast. So it's like really quick. So that's cool. I also did some interesting things, like when you click on this token, if you go to share this link, I'm going to go to a Twitter it's called a card validator. So I'm going to look at it. So unable to render card. Well, thanks, Twitter. I don't know why that doesn't work. It should. Sorry. I have to hit the share now button. So there's a special kind of request that I'm making when I hit share now. It says link copied. Sorry, it has to be this link. And so obviously, if you're on your phone, you're not going to share the URL. You're not going to go into the address bar on your phone. So typically, I'm like thinking like, okay, somebody's just going to hit a big share button. So what I do is I actually create this long encoded URL. It's really long, but I create an encoded URL. Inside those parameters are actual instructions for how to render this card on Twitter, Facebook, Discord, blah, blah, blah. So that's another thing that my helper does. So without having a server, without running a server up in the cloud, you can render these previews. So basically that's enough about like kind of the helper. So how did I build it? Basically, you can take a look at the README and see what these calls do. But I will show you the code itself. And what we're going to do is I'll show you how to set up the environment for Cloudflare Workers. It's very simple. You just go get a tool called Wrangler. So Cloudflare Wrangler is the tool to develop for Cloudflare Workers. It's very, very, very simple to get started. They have a little Rust guy there because you can write these in Rust, but I choose to write them in JavaScript. Keep in mind, I keep saying this and I can't stress this enough. It is not Node.js. It's actual front-end JavaScript. So when you run a Cloudflare worker, it's actually running front-end JavaScript, which is sort of a blessing and a curse. But you have to know that going into it when you develop Cloudflare workers. And the developer environment is just Wrangler dev. And what that does is that sets up an endpoint on my machine, 127. Basically localhost :8787. So that's a local environment for Wrangler. I'll make this a little bigger. So it's down here. I've got it running in one terminal. I'm going to switch to a different terminal and I'm going to run my tests. So you'll see that my tests are basically running against that terminal. And sometimes it's running against that localhost endpoint. And sometimes they run really fast. And it's because the localhost endpoint is also simulating the caching and the timeout of the cache. So that's actually really super helpful. So this is a very, very fast feedback cycle to testing these workers. You'll see my tests here. I wrote them in Mocha just because I wanted to try it because I actually really hate Jest, even though I use it for near apps or whatever. But basically, this is all the stuff. So that's all the tests. So let's look into okay, so how does this thing actually work, right? How does a Cloudflare worker actually work? It takes in a request from the client. So it takes in in this case, I'm doing everything with GET requests because I'm just reading from the blockchain. So all I'm doing is just the client, the user wants to make a GET request, and all I'm doing is just parsing the URL and giving them something. So you'll see my URLs here are, I have arguments, I have a URL. So test NFT path it's nothing more than an actual, like a path into a contract and a method inside a contract. So just like you would do a near API.js call, you would say, view function, and then you would give it the contract ID, and then you would give it the method name, and then you would give it the args. I've just sort of taken the same path here, like it's just the same sort of thing. Now, the only caveat here is that the args have to be stringified JSON. And I understand a lot of people are going to be like, what? How could you make a REST API that takes stringified JSON? Blah! Don't you know that you're not, blah! Yeah, convention, whatever, standards, and I don't care because I'm not going to translate. If I want to actually take, what if I want to take this and I want to turn it into a normal near API.js call? I don't want to have to change all the variable names and undo. I don't want to turn token ID into this. You know what I mean? I don't want to do that just so that I could be REST friendly or whatever. So I said, and I don't want to turn everything into query string params, question mark token underscore ID equals this. I don't want to do any of that. So I just decided I'm just going to stringify JSON because it's the easiest way to go. So, if you don't like it, too bad. I don't know. So anyway, that's basically how it works. So then you make a fetch, you return the result as JSON, and you just test it. So how does it actually work? Let's get into the Cloudflare worker. So every Cloudflare worker has this add event listener, and it's this fetch fetch event, right? So something's happened, right? Someone called fetch on a Cloudflare worker, I guess, is their intention. So I have a thing to handle CORS or CORS or CORS or whatever you want to call it, cross origin resource sharing, blah, 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 security. I don't even know what it's called. But basically I have something to handle that. So I handle options requests, which are like the pre-flight requests. Then I respond with wrapping the request. Now I do this so that the errors that are given, like basically it's not set up right away to like just throw errors. So basically when I throw errors, now I actually turn it into like an HTTP 500 response. So that's something that I did, is like, this is like a convenience wrapper. But the rest is very simple. So if you've ever written like a server or something, you've ever taken in like a quote unquote like a naked HTTP request, and just started to look at the different parts of it in JavaScript, you would have done this. You would have seen like user agent, headers, get the cache, max age, parse the URL, get the search parameters, get the path name. So everything I'm interested in, I'm just like parsing out. I have a bunch of helpers, like for example, qualify the path in the argument. So basically go through this path name and just pull out everything, right? Like pull out everything that I can. And I mean, there's a lot of throw errors. And the reason is because if the URL is like malformed, you should basically get like a 500 response. So you could simulate that here by just doing something like, you could do test NFT path, or you could just mess up the path back here. I mean, you could do anything, like you just take off the method name, and that then when you run the tests, you'll get like these errors. They'll be printed out here. So it's just like error, it's kind of it's a little cryptic to read. Internal server error. It doesn't actually, where does it spit it out? I'm not seeing it. It should actually come back out. Yeah, here. So it's, sorry, it comes out the test. So should have the whole, or no, sorry, that's the test case responding. I don't know where my my little throw errors are getting spat out, but anyway, I'll have to like look into that. But basically I was like throwing errors out of here. I think I'm just responding with the whole error just stringified. So I should actually do something a little bit more readable. It says error here, but it doesn't give you a whole hell of a lot to look at. But basically, yeah. So I go through, I parse the path. So I take everything out of the URL. So that's a URL, like this, with a bunch of info in it. Sorry, that's an encoded URL. A URL like this, contract. This is the contract name. This is the method name. These are the stringified JSON args. A whole bunch of args here. And then there's two types of args. I have like the arguments for the contract method, and then I have the arguments for, I call them actions. So that comes after the contract argument here is just a token ID. And then the actions argument is what to do once you've gotten that RPC response. So this last parameter, or last sort of URL kind of path argument, is essentially instructions to the Cloudflare worker what to do once you get that data. So if you look at this one, all this actions thing does is it basically specifies the fields that I want to get back from the response. So should just return a field with the last field name as a key. So if you actually want to look at the response to this, we can look at it in the browser. So basically this gets media and then some Cloudflare gateway, or sorry, it's a Pinata gateway image. So it's this image. So it's an NFT. And I'm not, if I leave off this actions argument where I'm narrowing down to a specific field of metadata that I want, this is what I get. I get the whole token. So basically I'm allowing you to kind of like shape your response, quote unquote, kind of like GraphQL or something like that, but it's not GraphQL. I mean, it's super basic. You just say the field I want, like for example, the field I want is issued at would be would be the same URL as this. Where is it? It'd be the same URL as this, except instead what we would do is we would go field metadata issued at, and then we will get the issued at field instead. That's it. So basically I'm allowing you to just kind of like scope down, but that becomes useful not just in getting responses from this service. It becomes useful in like when you want to create like this bot response, or you want to do other things. So anyway, long story short, you can do stuff like this, which is helpful. And it comes through, it gets parsed, it gets cached. There's obviously a handle the view method, handle a batch method. Let's look at those really quick. So handling a view is like really super basic. There's the parameters, contract, method, args, actions. And then if you further unpack actions, you get things like, oh, I guess that's kind of redundant. It's old. If you unpack actions, you get things like field, bot map, redirect, encode URL. These are things that you're asking of the Cloudflare worker. So if it's encode URL, the response is going to be to give you the encoded URL. So when you saw me hit share in the NFT gallery, that's what I was doing. I was getting an encoded URL from the helper. And then I took the encoded URL, I put it back into the helper to get the actual RPC response. Now, why do you need to encode a URL? Because if you send your friend a really nasty looking URL, like with a bunch of shit in it, like your friend's not going to click it, right? So you need to send them a URL that looks, pleasant. So what I do is I just base 64 encode the URL. So there's things like redirects. So I can encode a URL that has a JSON action, or sorry, I can encode a URL, that has actions, and one of the actions can be to redirect the user. So in the case of the bot thing, like I need to show one response to Twitter, and then I need to, when the user clicks it, I need to redirect to the actual token itself. So, you're not visiting the Cloudflare worker, you are, but then you're redirected if you're a human, like a normal user agent. And then if you're a bot, the Cloudflare worker sends you special HTML for the bot response. By the way, this is the special HTML. So again, it's like not like cleaned up. It's not perfect, but it's there, it's there, it works, it's up. So that's a view. And then I think Vadim asked about how do you do these batch responses? So I have a little bit of like a mental model for doing this. And the high level is that you should be able to send a bunch of view calls. So let's look at an actual request for a batch here. So in this batch, I am getting all the NFT tokens that I can up to 500. It's obviously going to stop before it hits 500 because there's not 500 NFTs, but I'm trying to get 500 NFTs, and I'm trying to get 500 sales for a specific NFT contract. This contract right here. So I'm going to the NFT contract, and I'm going to the marketplace that was created for the NFT contract, and I'm going to get the NFT tokens, and I'm going to get the sales. Now, what's interesting about these two view calls in this array is that each one will expand to make 5 RPC calls, where it will actually try to get 0 to 100 NFTs, but then it will go and it will do 101 to 200 and 201 to 300. So it will do this inside the Cloudflare worker. And then when it gets those RPC responses, it will flatten them. And the question is, how do you flatten your responses? So I know that the NFT contract gives me vectors back, so it gives me arrays. So I tell this method, this batch method, to flatten to an array. So what I want to get at the end of the day is one big flat array. So I don't want to see, NFT tokens like 5 different arrays, because that sucks. Because like once I get it back to the client, I just have to put those arrays together anyways, 0 through 500. So what I do is I just flatten it. So this is how this works. And by the way, also, this is actually really kind of cool. Sorry, I'm like, I'm pretty into this stuff. It's fun. Just thinking about it from like a process point of view. Sure, I may be doing 2 different calls to 2 different contracts and 2 different methods, and they're kind of structured a little differently. But I do want to do all RPC calls at the same time. I don't want to do the NFT contract and then do the market contract and do 5 in parallel, 5 in parallel. I actually want to do all 10. Like I want to go to the Cloudflare worker. So it goes 1 request to the Cloudflare worker, and then it just goes 10, and then it comes back and puts them together in 1 response. So the way to do that was to essentially map through all of the view calls. So views here is short for view function. So it's views. It's to look at the batch and to expand the batch based on the that limit and step thing that I told you about. So if you look at this, start from 0, go to 500 and step. So step is like step like a ladder, step 100 at a time. So what it's going to do is it's literally going to unroll that for me, and then it's going to store the calls as promises, right? Like it's literally just gonna basically call it, but then it's going to push it into this promises array. So it's going to call as fast as it can. So it goes through, obviously it goes through this loop and this loop, and there's notice there's completely absent of the word await. So it's not going to await anything, right? And then what you do is you get down here and you await all the responses. So you look at them, and then the reason it looks a little cryptic, a little weird here is because I need to kind of like await all the responses, but I need to kind of push them into, it's hard to explain. I need to push them into an array. I need to wait for their, I need to get their value. Like I need to get the promised result. I'm actually just thinking here, hold on a sec. For all the views, whoa, I have an I and an I inside here. This doesn't even work. Vadim, help me out here. Something's broken. I think I did this like relatively fast.
Did you try promises all? Will it work? If you
Yeah, the thing about promises all is that okay, so I have to wait for all the promises, but you don't actually get the values out of them. So I think I used to have that here. Boy, I didn't do this very well, did I? This is something completely separate. Why do I have 2 loops inside each other? This is so weird. So there's a bunch of promises inside here, but you shouldn't actually wait on all these promises. This is super weird. I don't even remember writing this. It's obviously been working, but it hasn't been working very well. It could be much more efficient. So let's fix it. It's promise.all, and then basically promises is inside each of the views. So you'd have to basically.
Is that array constructing the, or is that for loop like constructing the array of promises to then which you'd use promises.all? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, but I'm mapping it back into these views, so it's not
Okay.
It's not necessarily going to work unless you did something like unless you did you'd have to like take out and reduce all the promises, or just you'd store like another, like you basically just say like all promises equals. I hear what you're saying, Vadim. You're basically saying, because this will actually wait for them all. So they'll all fire. This will wait for them all, but if we're going through them one by one, they'll be like sequentially, like it'll. No, wait. Hold on. We're overthinking it. Wait a sec. All the calls are made. All the calls are already made in parallel. But then I need to, regardless, I need to wait for every single value to come back. So I can't proceed until I have all of the values anyways. But I guess the thinking here is that if you're going through them linearly in a loop, you're gonna get stuck. Like if promise 3 takes a long time, you'll get stuck there and then you won't be able to go forward. So we do have to, like, before we start iterating through and like picking out all the values of each promise, we have to basically, I don't even know why I like have this double loop. It's so weird. I kind of forget what that was. But let's fix this. So the way to like just await all of them would be to, yeah, just do what I was doing, which is like all promises, and you just have to store another array reference to this. So you just pull this out. So that's a call that returns a promise, and you just push it in both arrays. So one of the arrays is inside the view, and then you want that to resolve to. So I'm just keeping it there for reference association, like these promises belong to this view, these promises belong to that view. And then the rest, like all promises belong here. And then you do all those. So now after this point in time, every promise is done, it's resolved. And then you say I is less than views.length, I plus plus. So you go through all of the views, but in a sense, you don't really need you don't need to do this mapping stuff. You just need to switch promises for responses on the views. And then inside, you should be actually going through all promises, and you should be doing this. Otherwise, you're doing yourself like a disservice. And then you just await the promise value at J and put that into the response. And responses here in my sort of thinking of the world here is, so I can get rid of all the promise reference. I just get rid of them from this view object, and then basically push responses onto the views object. And then basically once you're out of here, you can flatten and sort, and then that should be all good. Okay, so yeah, I had some really like effed up logic. You know why it was not getting tripped up is because unfortunately the tests in the NFT gallery that I have, like they only really go through like the one call. So I actually should change my test now so I don't like have a regression test. It should actually be more like something like, you know, go get 100 NFTs and go step through them like, you know, 10 at a time, because that would actually show me a little bit more about the response. So check the response length is 2, and then I need to check that I know for a fact that there's more NFTs than 10 in here, for example. So I would go to check that this is more. I know that there should be at least more NFTs than actually 20. So I can check that multiple calls came back and they were flattened correctly. So that way my test is a little bit better. I think my server just basically crapped out because of all the edits I just made. Okay, so that's Wrangler dev, and this is the test running. So let's see if we fixed it, or at least, you know, so it looks like it passed. Just to make sure, because we did just change a lot of stuff, let's spot check this, you know, make sure that we can actually see the response. So here's a bunch of NFTs, and obviously we got a whole boatload of NFTs. Or no, sorry, those were the sales. These are sales. And then in another view, you see the array split here. In another view, we have all of the NFTs, tons of NFTs. There's like probably 70 or 80 NFTs on that marketplace now. So that's cool. Okay, sorry about the delay, guys, and sorry about the weird mix up there. That was pretty weird on the batch stuff. But basically it looks like it's all fixed. So essentially the idea is you have these separate views. Each view can be expanded to many RPC calls, but the whole point is you want to go make all the calls. And then what you want to do is you want to bring all the promises together. Then you want to await them all. So basically they're all firing in parallel. And then you're basically just going to wait until they all finish. And once they're all past the finish line, you're going to loop through them, and you're going to extract the value of each promise and put it back into the view. And then once the values, the RPC response values are there, you can loop and flatten everything, which is just like, it's pretty stupid, but it's like running through like, it's just doing like a reduce based on the flattened object and shit like that. And then there's actually a sorting functionality, which is actually kind of cool. So you can sort by a field. And when it comes to sales, so check this out. When it comes to sales, I sort by a condition of the near that is up for sale. And I actually sort them highest to lowest, but I have to pass in a value of what I call like BN, or like, you should sort based on a big number. Now I do something a little bit sort of hacky, and I don't know how this is going to work out long term, but I treat all the big numbers like near. And Vadim, you're going to find this really funny. What do I do here? When I go, I do results, sort index. Oh yeah, get nested field. So this is interesting. So when it's passed in with a parse value of big number, so all I do really, and this is pretty hacky, is I take the value that you gave me, and then I parse the near amount, and then I turn it into a float, and I give you like up to 8 decimals. So basically, I'm not actually doing like a quote unquote a big number sort. I'm just doing a float sort in JavaScript, and I'm only sorting up to like 8 significant digits of near. So the thinking here is just that, for the interim, for sorting based on near values, this is probably going to work. Up to 8 digits of, whatever. What do they call it? 8 digits of significance. But anyway, like that's sort of what I have for now. So that's the API server. That's the whole thing. That's how it works. You get a response with like a whole boatload of stuff, and then you can do interesting things like you can power these bot responses. But what's actually cool is, so I showed you the bot response, and then when I go visit it, where do I go? I go to the actual token, right? So I go to the actual page. So I get redirected, but the Twitter bot sees this. So you can do essentially link sharing. You can do the caching, which you saw in action here. And then when you refresh the page, browser's going kind of slow. I think there's too many GIFs. So when I refresh, well, geez, it's really slow. When you refresh the page, it's pretty quick. I think it's just like going a little slow on my machine. But basically that's it. So yeah, you guys have any questions, and then I'll stop sharing, and then we can do Vadim and the API server.
Yeah, I don't have questions. Great work, Matt.
It's fun. I mean, it was something I needed for this NFT gallery. So I do admit I kind of like slapped it together pretty quick, but it's because I didn't want to worry about like having a server up in the cloud, and like what happens when your server has like, like a seg fault or something, and it just like goes down. I don't know. Like this Cloudflare worker thing to me seems like so much more autopilot, but there are things you can't do, because it's like, it's not Node.js. You can have environment variables. They do have an option for having like a key value store. So you can do like key value storage, like very temporary. It's obviously not intended to be like, it's not a database. I've used Cloudflare workers that have talked to backends, like talk to PostgreSQL databases. I've used it to talk directly to Amazon accounts and go straight into S3, for example, and like put something in and take something out of a bucket. So they're pretty flexible, but that's about it. Dorian, you got any questions?
Yeah, so so just because like I haven't worked with the Cloudflare service workers before, like its primary job I'm a little bit fuzzy on. Like, do you mind just kind of like giving me a brief overview of like its primary purpose?
Yeah, so normally if I were to get all these NFTs out of a smart contract, I would have to do it with client-side JavaScript from each user's computer, right? but Cloudflare Workers allow you to lift up that client-side JavaScript and put it in the cloud. And then it's essentially like, it's essentially like having, it's like having like a browser tab in the cloud that can go load web pages for you. And then once the web pages are loaded, you can send them to all the users of your app. So what I used the Cloudflare Worker for was to go talk to near API.js, get a bunch of data, store it, in this temporary browser tab that's floating in the cloud. And then whenever users want that data, the data is already there. Like it's already from the blockchain. So after the first user goes and gets all the NFTs for this gallery website, the other users aren't talking to the blockchain, they're talking to the Cloudflare Worker. So you can do all these interesting things, and like, especially when it comes to like making multiple requests. So I don't know if you've ever, actually, let's do this. This will be a fun one. I don't know if you've ever done this, Dorian, like looked at the network tab when you go to a thing like Ref Finance, and then, you want to go to pools and look at all this. Look at my computer, right? Doing all these RPC calls, right? And each one is just like, go to this pool ID, go to this pool ID, go to this pool ID. So what I'm talking about with this Cloudflare Worker API helper is you can take all of these requests, and if you look at what happens when you go to the NFT gallery, when it loads, it just makes it actually, if I look at them just in terms of JavaScript, it just makes this one, where is it? Sorry, hang on. No, it's the XHR. I actually don't know why there's like 3 different requests here. Hold on. Oh, it's because no. I don't know why it's looking at all 3, but, or why it's looking at 3 different ones here, but it should only be doing 1. Maybe it's something wrong with my React app that it fires off like 3 requests. I probably should get a handle on that.
So essentially,
no, sorry, Dorian, there are 3 different NFT contracts that I'm looking at. So I'm looking at 3 NFT contracts and I made 3 requests, right? But I actually could even batch those up if I wanted to. But basically 3 different contracts, but within this NFT contract, let's say I wanted to go get like 5 pages of NFTs, it would still only be 1 request. So what I'm saying here is that you could batch up all of these Ref Finance calls and turn them into a single call to this helper, and then the helper can go get all of the pool information, and then after I've done that, you come along and you want that same information, it's already there. So
so
but right now this is happening on everybody's computer all the time. Every time they visit the webpage, like if I refresh here, it's just going to do the same thing. Look at like all these requests, right? So the whole point is that all of these could be boiled down to 1. The bulk of the requests could be made like, and then the responses could be cached like every minute, let's say, because you do want, like, you want new information. So, but then if 1,000 users go and visit Ref Finance within a minute, they'll all get the same response, right? Like they'll just get the 1 cache response. So what it does is it takes the load off of our RPC and like blockchain network, like, and it sort of tries to bundle it into like kind of like a little bit of a, like it's a helper. So I mean, like not very good terminology for the blockchain space, but it is basically like a middleman. It's like it's like intermediary. It's someone that will help you out,
So like so then your own browser or your own client, like these just kind of just gets like, it's like a projection of what this like cloud like helper, or sorry, Cloudflare helper is doing, right? Like you just kind of like, it's just like it already made all the RPC requests, so now it's just like sending you, the user, the result of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's it's just a way to speed up the page as well. Like, so the user's experience of this NFT market is like, boom, like snap, right? Like it should just happen quickly, right?
That makes sense. And like another, sorry, no, like we're on time, but like something I am curious about, just off the top of my head, is like where like are these images like stored? Like
Oh,
are they
these images for the NFT gallery, they're just links. So this NFT gallery was just kind of like, you know, the NFT market thing that I put up on testnet, like the fun one, that these are the NFTs from that. So
okay, so it's just like Imager or like Google or whatever. It's just like random links.
yeah, I mean, it's not a serious NFT gallery. It's just, these are just links, right? So they're just image links, and some of them work, some of them break. I don't know what this is, you know. Anyway, we better stop recording, and then we'll start again for Vadim's API server. Sorry it took so long, but I hope it was useful to somebody. All right. Well, for episode 26, bye for now.